Welcome, everyone. Happy Tuesday. We're going to get started in just a minute or so. But while we wait for everyone to join in today's webinar, we're going to start off with our question of the day. So in the chat, we'd love for you to answer this question. How do you collect feedback on your summer meals program? So feel free to tell us in the chat. Also, feel free to introduce yourselves. I'd love to hear who's on the call. And we'll get started in just a minute. Still see those numbers ticking up, so we'll wait one more minute. And if you're just joining, welcome, welcome. We're going to get started in about a minute. And while we wait, we'd love to hear from you. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and then also answer our question of the day. How do you collect feedback on your summer meals program? Ooh, I see someone has a No Kid Hungry Youth Ambassador who created a survey for kids. That's fantastic. And you've incorporated the feedback. I love to hear it. All right, we're going to get started in just a second, but while we wait, please do answer our welcome question. How do you collect feedback on your summer meals program? Talking with participants. Wow, they're flooding in now. I love to see it. Great. For the new sponsors, we're talking a lot about getting feedback and how to incorporate that and really, making summer meal sites fun and inclusive and serving holistically the needs of families. So with that, continue answering this question, continue introducing yourselves. Welcome everyone. And we're going to go ahead and kick this off because we got a lot to talk about today. My name is Paige Picorni. I'm a senior program manager here at No Kid Hungry, and I'm excited to be the host of today's webinar. We have two fantastic speakers, and today we're talking all about strategies to improve the summer meals experience for children and families. This is part of our Schools Out, Foods In summer webinar series. So thank you for joining, and thank you for, if you've been on this journey with us, thank you for continuing it. And if it's your first webinar, welcome to the family. Next slide. Just a few housekeeping notes. The webinar is being recorded and the slide deck and recording will be shared to all attendees and registrants via email. And we'll have time at the end of the presentation to hear from you. So please place all of your questions in the Q&A box as they pop in your head throughout the presentation. We have closed captioning available for the webinar, and if you have any technology or accessibility issues, please message Share Our Strength. My colleague Hannah on the other end of that will help troubleshoot, and you can, on the bottom of your screen, you should be able to turn on closed captioning. We encourage you to use the chat box throughout the session to engage with each other and the speakers. There's a variety of people on the call with a lot of cumulative experience, so let's tap into that, and I encourage you to chat with each other. At the end of the webinar, a brief survey will pop up in your browser window. Please take a moment to complete the survey. We review, all honesty, I read each and every response because we want to improve your webinars and make sure they're meeting your needs because, we only want to get better. So please do complete that really brief survey. And now for today's agenda. So after some quick welcomes and introductions, I'm going to share some resources from No Kid Hungry and a little bit of framing around this conversation. And then I'm going to pass it off to the real experts on the call to talk about strategies to improve the summer meals experience. First, you'll hear from Cara Moore from Lowcountry Food Bank in South Carolina. And then you'll hear from Debbi Davidson from our Kansas City Recreation Center in Kansas. And then we'll have time for a Q&A session at the end. So reminder again, put those questions in the Q&A box and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. Next slide. So improving the experience, right? So there's lots of ways to do this. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things, but just kind of to start off, next slide, I want to talk about the who. Who are we trying to reach? Who are we trying to listen to? And how do we listen to them? So for who? young people, right? The people visiting our sites. And not just those who do attend your programs, but those who don't, and why don't they? Parents, guardians, and caregivers, we know they're super influential, especially for younger children, to get them to sites. And then also community partners and other youth serving organizations, to make sure you're meeting the needs of your community and partnering where applicable. How do you listen to your community? There's so many ways, right? Talking to people, but also more formal ways like surveys or listening sessions, conversations at sites, and also using community data and research reports can be really helpful when designing your program and looking for ways to improve it, to make it more inclusive. Next slide. What are you trying to find out? And this is really up to you. There's so many questions. These are just a few. But what do you want to learn about your program, about your community that you're trying to serve to make your program better meet their needs? Do they like the food? What do they wish the food offerings were? Does the site feel inviting and inclusive? Is the site location convenient? Are the site times convenient? And what would they change to make the program better? And as long as it's, compliant, right? Can we make those changes to make it a little bit better? Next slide. So here are just a few tips if you are going the more formal route of gathering feedback about your program this summer. First, on surveys, it's great to offer some sort of incentive to get folks to complete those surveys, like a raffle entry or a small token, like stickers, small toys for the young kids, maybe not parents like small toys too, right? Offer in multiple languages and if you can, also verbally administered to really make sure that the survey is accessible to all individuals. And then for kids, have kid-friendly options. I've seen some great options, some great surveys out in the field. One being just a smiley face survey where kids, when we have a lower reading level, can just circle the smiley face or draw a happy smiley face, a sad smiley face when asking a question. Or one thing I saw, and this is at a library in St. Louis, make it a game. You'll see in those photos, there was a youth ambassador at Operation Food Search, a food bank out of the St. Louis area, and they had the great idea of asking kids to make their own meals using different food items. And of course, she guided them to make sure they were reimbursable, but she wanted to see what the kids would pick, what food items the kids would choose. So this is a really great way to engage, and it was a fun activity at sites. They brought some, prizes for the kids that completed it. So just a few ideas. For listening sessions, always try to offer multiple times that are convenient for participants, whether they're adults or children. Consider translation services if you are serving families who do not speak English. And then also, if you do have this option, offering childcare or vouchers for childcare, if you are trying to engage parents and caregivers. Next slide. We have a few resources that might help with this process of designing inclusive programs. What are the questions you need to ask? So those both are linked here. Some of the resources do reference specifically school meals, but the questions are rich and good for both summer meals and after school meals. So don't shy away from the title. I encourage you to look at both of these resources, despite the name being school meals. Next slide. We also have resources on meal quality and introducing local foods. So these two are linked here and are really great examples of ways to work on your food items and menus to get more inclusive and fresh, fun food. Next slide. And one strategy we've seen, the youth ambassadors out there, this is part of that youth engagement strategy, is making the sites younger, right? If a person, serving meals or is engaging with the children there, is closer to their age, we do find, at sites higher participation and engagement from that. So consider also great for staffing, hire students and young adults. We know how hard staffing is during the summer. Consider including volunteer opportunities for young people at your sites. If they're too young to be fully hired, or you don't have the funding, volunteer opportunities are great. A lot of, especially high schoolers need that to graduate. Or consider creating a youth advisory council to help design and promote your program, really giving power back to young people. They're experiencing this, this world. So what do they want? What do they need? And how can we use that to make your programs better? And that link there talks a little bit about hiring young people in summer meals programs, but also lots of great tips for staffing during the summer meals. Next slide. Lastly, I'm going to go through a lot of resources, so I'll try to go through this quickly to get to more of the meat of the conversation, but I wanted to provide some programming resources. We totally a best practice, right? Like when you can provide some sort of enrichment engagement activity while meals are being served. So here are just a few resources from USDA, the National Summer Learning Association, and then consider partnering with local youth serving organizations. So if you're not an expert at programming, that's okay. Who in your community is and how can you partner with them? Next slide. More and more resources. I won't go through each and every one of these, but we do have a plethora of summer meals resources on our website. So please do check those out. Next slide. And with the new non-congregate rural option, I wanted to highlight these newer resources that we've created for those rural communities that might be eligible for non-congregate summer meals this year. So we have a great webinar that was recorded just a few weeks back, an implementation guide, and some really great case studies. Next slide. And for everyone on this call, I want you to check out our Summer Meals Outreach Toolkit. If you don't want to create a bunch of graphics to promote your program, we got you. We have downloadable, customizable, plug and play, all the good stuff, template letters to caregivers, really lots of great information there, all available in English and Spanish. So I'll put the link in the chat in a little bit, but definitely check that out. Next slide. And I do also want to highlight our Summer Meals texting line and free meal finder. So anyone can text food or comida to 304-304 to find the nearest Summer Meal site to them. A lot of those outreach resources highlight this texting line. And so it's a great resource for your communities, whether you're serving summer meals or not. Next slide. And as I mentioned, this is the fourth part of our Summer Meals webinar series. And sadly, we only have one more to go. It feels like it flew by. But next month, we'll be talking about year-round meals, tips for transitioning from summer to after-school meals. So definitely tune in for that. And if you're registered for this webinar, you should automatically be registered. But if you're not sure, go ahead and register again. Next slide. And all of the news today, we have a new website, not a brand new website, but a new web redesign. All the links should still be good. We're still at bestpractices.nogeithungry.org, but we have some great new features and it looks really nice. So new features, we have the No Get Hungry focus area map that identifies areas with the highest number of children in need. And then we also have the CEP Opportunity Finder tool that helps advocates and local education agencies identify districts and schools that are eligible for community eligibility provision. And those are just the new stuff. We have all of our great old stuff, our resources, our webinars, our program pages. So definitely take a look. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Cara. Thank you so much. I'll start dropping some links in the chat, but can't wait to hear from you.
Thank you, Paige. As Paige said, I'm with Lowcountry Food Bank in South Carolina, and I wanted to start by just giving some context and some background for who we are and what we're anticipating in terms of our summer meal program this year. So if we flip to the next slide, that's a map of our territory. Our food bank covers the entire coast of South Carolina. As of right now, we are anticipating having about 20 SFSP sites spread across 5 of our 10 counties. We're a self-prep sponsor. We have a central production kitchen in our main warehouse in Charleston. All of the meals are prepared out of that kitchen. So we use a combination of menus to serve our various sites, depending on whether they are local in Charleston or farther away. All of our sites are unaffiliated. So we, as of right now, don't directly run any sites under the food bank, but we work with independent organizations, mainly community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, parks and rec facilities, YMCAs, libraries, and we see it as our mission or our purpose to kind of fill in the gaps. We do not have the capacity to, nor do we want to try and duplicate what our school districts are already doing through their amazing food service teams. Many of them are also sponsors. They sponsor dozens of sites. We exist to serve sites that they or other sponsors may not be able to reach, either because they're too far away or they're too small or whatever it may be. We just want to plug in those gaps. We are operating a non-congregate program, but it's grant funded. As I was just telling Paige prior to the webinar starting, actually, when we looked at the 20 sites that have applied through us this year and compared them against the USDA's eligibility map and the new No Kid Hungry eligibility map, only one of them actually technically fit the definition of rural. So as of right now, we're not anticipating having a non-congregate SFSP site this year, but our non-congregate program in Williamsburg County has been operating for about 7 years now, independently funded. The good news is that based on where those sites are located, they should qualify in the future as rural sites that would be eligible for SFSP reimbursement. So we're optimistic that by next summer, we'll be able to phase out of the grant funding and actually transition those sites into SFSP, which from a long-term sustainability standpoint will be amazing. So next slide. We try to create and try to engage our kids and families through the summer programs in many different ways. One of those is nutrition education. We are really fortunate in that Lowcountry Food Bank is a SNAP education implementing agency in our state. So what that means for us is that we receive funding that we can use to implement training, to develop materials, and to provide guidance to our network of meal partners and our network of pantry partners and other community partners around creating policies, systems, and environmental changes that will help our neighbors make the best food choices for their families within the budget that they have to work with. And so that encompasses a lot of different things. When it comes to our kids, that includes initiatives like Summer Learn and Grow, Kids in the Kitchen, and Cooking Matters courses. And if those of you who are familiar with No Kid Hungry have probably heard of Cooking Matters before. Summer Learn and Grow is a kids-specific program that our nutrition team piloted last summer. That it involves a 1-hour lesson that is usually very interactive that they take into our summer meal sites and any other partners that want to engage them during the summer months that have kids on site for summer camps or other programming. And it involves learning and doing. So last year, the theme was parts of the plant as an example. And I got to shadow one of those lessons. It was really fun. The kids, there was some initial learning about what the different parts of the plant were. They got to engage in a movement-based activity, plant yoga. And then they actually got to make a healthy snack and learn some basic culinary skills in the process, like safe handling of knives and other utensils. So it was very much an engaging activity. The kids that participated at our summer meal sites loved it. And it was something that we could offer as kind of a value add to our summer partners as they were developing their programming and enticing ways to bring kids into their site to eat in a setting where we know meals had to be congregate. So we wanted something else that would draw them in there. Kids in the Kitchen is a multi-course lesson that usually takes place during the school year, but that we're looking at piloting in a different format for summer as well, that involves members of our nutrition team and volunteers implementing lessons over one lesson a month over a 6-month period to teach kids different food concepts. And then Cooking Matters courses reach both kids and potentially parents or the adults in their lives through lessons that engage them in learning how to make healthy foods. And then they get to take that recipe home along with the ingredients to prep it at home. And the store tours allow us to take people into stores and actually kind of walk them through what it means to read a shelf label. What is unit pricing? What's the difference between, are there any appreciable differences between fresh fruits and vegetables, frozen fruits and vegetables, canned fruits and vegetables, and really give them some tools to be able to decode the grocery store shelves a little bit better when they're in there. So, and finally, I wanted to mention that our nutrition team does a great job of providing both visual cues and some fun takeaways for kids at all of our summer meal sites. This year, it's going to be water bottles, I believe. So every kid that comes to one of our summer meal sites will get a reusable water bottle to take home. And we incorporate some nutrition education related language into all of our site coordinator trainings, particularly around encouraging kids to try new foods that they may not be familiar with, to appreciate that oftentimes it takes multiple exposures to new food items before kids will decide if they like them or not. And you'll often hear us throw around the phrase, "Don't yuck my yum." You may have heard that one before. We love it here at the food bank, not just for kids, but for ourselves and our own benefit. Just by way of reminding others that just because you don't like something doesn't mean that someone else does not enjoy it. And it's not fair to talk bad or yuck their yum if it's something that they may enjoy or may want to try. So nutrition education is really important to us, but we also want to try to engage and provide for families where we can. So if we go to the next slide, I want to talk about some of the wraparound supports that we incorporate into our summer programs. And some of these are summer specific, but many of them happen year round as well. And we realize that if that child who is walking in the door at a summer meal site very well may have parents at home, siblings at home who are also experiencing food insecurity. And it's hard for any of us to watch a parent come into a summer meal site with a child, watch that child eat a meal, but then not necessarily be able to eat that same meal themselves. And oftentimes we realize those parents may be sacrificing additional meals at home so that their kids can eat. And that to us is untenable. So wherever we can, we try to incorporate programming and supports that can ensure that family, if they are experiencing food insecurity, can access resources to help fill the gaps at home. That includes pop-up produce distributions, which are small scale distributions of fresh fruits and vegetables that we target specifically at our school and community partner sites where children are going. Usually with those, it's a van with a couple of our staff members and maybe 2 pallets of produce going out, setting up on site, serving up to 100 households who each get to take home a bag of about 10 to 15 pounds of produce. We have school-based markets, some of whom operate only during the school year, but several of which actually are able to stay open during the summer months as well. And these are schools that really have become community resource hubs. Several of them are located in largely rural areas where grocery stores may be few and far between. And they stay open so that kids and families have another convenient place they can go to get instant access to shelf-stable, pantry-staple type items, and occasionally fresh foods as well. We do pre-packed pantry boxes, sometimes alongside the produce. We have a special relationship with a couple of organizations in our territory that specifically provide programming and supports for agricultural workers that are traveling through our area during the spring and summer months following the harvests. So we've made it a point the last few summers when they're in the area during June and July to provide pantry boxes and produce for them. As I remember, being struck by how ironic it was that many times these families spend all day in the fields harvesting, beautiful crops like watermelons and tomatoes and the things that we find on our grocery store shelves, but then go home and don't necessarily have access to those same things themselves. So we're trying to help make things a little easier for them while they're here. We have our Backpack Buddies program, which is very, very much scaled back in the summer months. We don't have as many backpack partners, but we do still distribute some bags through some of our summer meal sites, as well as other community partners who may need them for one-off type events or want to provide a supplement to kids coming to their summer meal sites. Of course, we have our network of food pantries. We've got about 250 local pantries that operate across our 10 counties, and we are constantly trying to connect families in need with those pantries. We have some great referral postcards that we will make available through all of our summer meal sites that have our website and a QR code on it that can be scanned to link to an agency locator tool on our website. So anybody can plug in their zip code and find the closest pantry for them. And then we have our Fresh for All and mobile pantry distributions, which are larger scale produce and pantry staple distributions, where we can usually serve upwards of 250 to 300 households. And oftentimes those will happen at school sites or other community-based sites. So next slide. And Paige referenced earlier, or asked the question earlier about how we elicit feedback or how we gather feedback from the neighbors and the kids who are visiting our summer meal sites. We do have a survey process. We are fortunate to have a full-time staff member who specializes in data and evaluation. And she's worked with us over the last couple of years to really refine the surveys that we use. At one point, I think they had ballooned to 30 or more questions, and we realized that a lot of the questions we were asking, we weren't really using the feedback from, and we don't want to take up any more of our neighbors' valuable time than we absolutely need to, and we want to ensure that every question we ask them results in data that can be actionable for us. We don't want to ask them a question that may involve them giving feedback that we can't do anything about. Like asking site coordinators, hey, could we make the reporting process any easier? Well, most of them will tell you yes, but the reality is that we have certain rules we have to follow under USDA guidelines for SFSP. So there's only so much we can do to streamline reporting, unfortunately. But for our neighbors, we have a site coordinator survey that we administer electronically. And then we have parent and child surveys that are largely paper-based because we realize and appreciate that in many of our communities, not everybody has easy access to the internet. And giving a stack of paper surveys to a site coordinator and having them hand them out as parents come and go to pick up their kids or bring their kids to the meal site resulted in more quality and greater volume of responses, because we could reach them at the point of service. They could fill it out right there. Coordinators could collect it, and then we could pick up those surveys during site visits or when they come to pick up their meals. So we read every single response that we get on these surveys. We actually have a volunteer who comes in and compiles all the results for us and distills highlights and key findings from those surveys that we can then use to develop summary reports that we will share both internally with our leadership team. And ultimately, ideally, if we get enough responses, we want to be able to share them back externally with those summer meal partners. We want to create reports that show them what we learned and create some openings to talk more with them about how we can help them increase the number of people who are visiting their sites, enhance the experience for the kids and families who are coming to their sites. For example, we ask the question of parents, how do they learn about the program? How do they know how do they learn about things that are going on in their community? And the responses to that question may help us refine our marketing and outreach strategy for future years. We also ask questions about whether or not a family is receiving SNAP or WIC, or if they know what those programs are, or if they know for certain that they're not eligible for those programs. And then we can use the results of that to better understand, the percentage of families coming to our sites who may need additional assistance, but maybe don't know that they can qualify for that additional assistance, or are not yet taking advantage of all of the tools that are available to them. And we can work with our site coordinators to help connect those families to organizations that can help them make application for those benefits. So we are happy to share examples of any of our surveys if anybody's interested. I can send them through Paige and she can share them out. But the last slide in here then just talks about how we gather and use neighbor feedback. And I just wanted to share out a couple of our findings from last year. So just over a third of households that responded to our parent survey at our summer sites stated that they currently do receive SNAP and or WIC, while almost 60% reported that they are not eligible and 8% reported that they didn't know if they were eligible. So there's a small percentage there, certainly, that we may be missing, that may not have thought about applying before, or may have tried but got stymied by all the hoops they had to jump through. So that's an audience we'd like to reach. Over 2/3 of households reported that having access to the summer meal program often or sometimes helped them worry less about feeding their families. So that was an important finding for us. We know that those meals are important. They may not meet all of a family's food needs for the week, but if they can help one parent, one family, alleviate the concern for, if the 3 or 4 or 5 days a week that meal site is open, about worrying about how they're going to prepare, where lunch is going to come from, or where snack is going to come from those days for their kids, then that to us tells us it's a worthwhile investment. And then almost 40% of respondents said that having a grab and go meal option available at their sites would have been helpful to them. And 20% said they would love to be able to pick up meals and snacks for more than one day at a time. So that was an important finding, and certainly something that we will continue to use to help advocate for continued expansion of the availability of non-congregate meals, because it does make a difference to our sites. And so in closing, I guess what I would say is, I know there are a lot of food bank partners on this call, but for those of you who are representing school districts or faith-based organizations or other organizations, I would encourage you to reach out to the food pantries and food banks in your area if you're interested in partnering to bring some of these additional resources to the kids and families you serve. Many of the pantries and food banks out there provide similar programming and similar resources. So don't hesitate to ask. It could be something as simple as a Backpack Buddies bag, or maybe a fresh produce distribution. But we love and are always open to new partnerships. So thank you. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Paige.
Thank you so much, Cara. That was wonderful. And if you have any questions about anything Cara shared, please do put those in the Q&A box and we'll get to them at the end of today's session. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Debbie.
Helps if I unmute. Hi, I'm Deb Davidson. I'm from Arkansas City, Kansas, and I believe I need the next slide. There we go. Little small community in South Central Kansas, directly south of Wichita, right on the Oklahoma-Kansas border. About 12,000 population, very, very rural, very small community, about 6 miles from one side of town to the other. A little bit about myself. I work for a Parks and Recreation Commission, Arkansas City Parks and Recreation Commission. And this is my 25th year. And 25 years ago, I was hired as the aquatics director. And if you're not familiar with that term, it's basically managing an indoor natatorium pool and an outdoor seasonal pool. Things were kind of progressing along, and about 5 years into my career, a colleague and I, actually two colleagues and I had went to a state parks and rec conference, and we heard the concept about a summer day camp and how this was, if you think back about 18 years ago, this was when we were really starting the campaigns to get kids out, keep them moving in the summer. So as we drove the 3 hours home, we began to, the three of us, sort of, I would say, plan to talk our director, our Parks and Rec director, into this all-day day camp. And I have learned since then, it's really not a good idea to go off the path and say, sure, I'll help. All I have is 2 pools all summer. And one of the girls had went to a session about the child nutrition feeding programs and said, hey, we wouldn't have to do lunches this way. You know, the kids bring lunches, store lunches, be responsible for that. And my response very quickly was, I don't even like to cook at home. So she assured me that this was going to be the greatest thing ever. And I really, in looking back, have to say it really has been the greatest thing ever. The flip side of that, we all dove into it. And one of the three musketeers moved to a different department, and the third person left. So I distinctly remember it was about 107 degrees. I'm on the pool deck and had no living brain cells at that time. And my boss said, what are we going to do here? I know you do this so well. I have all the faith in the world that you can add this to your department. You know, that sounded like a compliment to me when in reality, I was so sucked into it. But I do know the blessings that have come to myself personally and to this community because of that program. We are in our 18th year, and we started for about the first 10 years with the summer food service program, and then transitioned into kind of a seamless food service with doing that risk after school. We are totally a pretty much one-man show. We do all of our shopping, preparing, portioning, serving in-house, and with very few people helping out with that. Next slide, please. Like I said, we're a very small community. We're very financially challenged as well. Over the last 10 years, we have lost about 60% of our employment opportunities way before COVID. And it was a real learning curve for many, many years as to how our community would survive. So if any good thing came out of having that knowledge, when COVID hit, we had already lived COVID and lived with very, very few resources and employment opportunities. But with that, the statistics are showing we have an 80% plus of kids in K through 12 on free and reduced lunches. The Kansas statistics are 1 in 5 children are food insufficient. In our community, it's about 1 in 3. And I always use the analogy, if you have 2 people in your office right now and you're standing all there together, you know, one of you would go to bed hungry. And I grew up a farm girl and didn't know we were poor until I was probably about 30 years old. But I do know that I never went to bed hungry. And that's sort of the heartstring that's pulled each and every time I come up against a challenge with doing what we want to do and providing meals for kids. We are, the entire community of 18 years and younger qualifies for our site. There's no income check. I know there are a few of you that will be jealous of that, but I feel like I'm pretty blessed with it. I really don't know if that would be the straw that broke the camel's back if I had to dive into what a lot of you do. Next slide. Before I explain this, I have to say that the picture was, I think, summer before last, and we had served our 1 millionth meal. And we had set up these three adults are people that are in my kitchen staff, and we had set up ahead of time that we were going to make a big hoopla and blow off air horns, and we had a special little t-shirt that said, I was just served the 1 millionth meal at Arc City Recreation. Well, the quietest person at our camp came through, this little girl here, and I would suspect she's still terrorized for life, but she was our 1 millionth meal, and we were all pretty proud of that. In the summer, we do have 3 sites. Our day camp that I mentioned is, it's called IYQ. If you say it really fast, it's I like you. It's a day camp that services about 200 families a week. It's a Monday through Thursday. We serve a hot meal there and then an afternoon snack. That's sort of what I referenced earlier about providing lunches for the families that, or the children that come to camp. It's also an open site, and we serve about 350 to 400 extra that come to that site at our lunch, our noon meal. It runs from 11:30 to 12:30. We serve, if you kind of do the math there, we serve about 450 to 650, depending on the day, in about, I think our record is about 42 minutes, but we're always under the 1 hour. It is a congregate site. You'll see a couple of slides here in a minute of the kids. And we serve that out of a multi-purpose building that houses our activities. Directly across the street, we have a 100-year-old pool that holds 2 million gallons of water. And that's our seasonal summer pool. It's kind of like the thing for kids to do in the summer. And so we do an afternoon snack at our safety break, which is about 3 o'clock. And it's really been one of those things that if you're in Parks and Rec or probably in public service, we all know we're not in it to get rich. And I would hate to think of the amount of money that I spent over the years by either buying lunch or snacks from the concession stand for kids that were dropped off at the pool in the early morning and left there all day. So this was a great thing, saved me a whole lot of money. Plus the children, even though we do sell concessions, the children are given a nutritious snack. It is somewhat of a captured audience. They're there. Once they got on to what we were doing and how it worked, we serve about 200 to 250 each and every day. We do that 7 days a week. Our Kids Cafe was our off-site prior to this summer. It's been at our main rec center building, and it also became our non-congregate grab and go site during COVID. And we went from serving about 30 meals a week to serving 5,000 meals and snacks a week with our grab and go non-congregate parent pickup. It included a 5-meal packet and a 5-day snack packet. After COVID, and we went back to the congregate setting, we've averaged about 10 to 12 meals a week. So I'm a big advocate of non-congregate. There are just a lot of situations that people can't get to the site each and every day. There are a lot of parents that aren't comfortable with their children coming in without them and sitting and eating. A lot of people don't have the gas to drive 5-6 days a week. So this program was huge for us. We became kind of a traffic jam in that area, and if there was any negative publicity that came out of any of it, it was that we clogged up traffic one night a week for an hour and a half. And to which I replied in my mind only, we need to call the ambulance. We did decide, after getting the go-ahead, we are designated as rural, to have a non-congregate setting with a parent pickup and a grab and go, to move the site to a multi-purpose building. And we will be serving a grab and go 3-meal pickup on Thursday evenings for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So the children in our community will have the opportunity to have a meal for each day of the week and a snack. There's sort of another little, I would say, bonus to this site and this area. I didn't tell you that my department employs about 170 plus teenagers from the age of 14 to about 20 during the summer. And this area is where all of our activities and facilities are. And once you explain to teenagers under the age of 18, they can eat hot meals or meals for free, and how much they'll save not going through the fast food lanes, they're all about it. So this program not only helps, the young people that are basically working for minimum wage to stretch their dollars, also the good nutritious meals that they get. And then depending on what happens with CACFP, we'll see where we go once school's out. Next slide. I promised you some slides. Everybody helps. The slide on the left, your left, is our day camp site. And those are the young people that are on my team that run camp and are sitting with the kids that are not only campers, but they're also kids that come in and eat with us. On the right is our pool site. It's very primitive. We put the snacks in a wagon, we pull them across the street to the pool, and they're all handed out in about 15 minutes. We have a very, very strong collaborating community. That's one of our police officers here in town, and they're always willing to come hang out, hand out a few meals, visit with the kids. Next slide. I told you why we do it, or how we do some of it. This is why we do it. If you look at these faces, and there is any way that one of them might go to bed hungry, how can we not do it? I always laugh and say, watch out what you wish for, because the numbers have went beyond what I ever envisioned. I also say that I'm actually 29 years old, and this is what all of that does for you. Just kidding. Next slide. And this is how we do it. I am blessed beyond blessings to have young people that embrace what we do, see the importance of it, have fun with it. Our dress-up characters are a big draw. The kids can't wait to see what the next character is going to be. These are actually costumes that we used for other special events. Next slide. Activities to increase participation. Like I said, I sort of have a captive audience. We have day camp there, but we always have activities and crafts and things left over. to use and as we want to. And so when the children that aren't enrolled in camp come to eat with us, we have areas where they can do recreation activities, crafts. We're in a collaboration with the early childhood literacy program to help stop summer slides. So we have a little library. The public library's mobile unit comes once a week. The sports camps in the area from our community colleges and high schools use the program at lunch for their campers. There's a theater program that walks down 1 week out of the summer and eats with us. We do some incentives, and we slacked off of it last year, but it's back this year, where each child, every time they come to eat with us, they're given a ticket, they put their name on. And in the month of June, we draw for 2 bikes, and in the month of July, we draw for 2 bicycles. So it's a little bit of an encouragement. And if they bring a friend for the first time, they get 2 tickets. We try to get around and visit with everyone there. Many times we'll have drop-in celebrities. Our fire department will come, our police department, our college mascots, our high school mascots. It's just a real fun time for all the kids. Next slide. And I'm not sure, after listening to Cara and the agenda, where I came up from this, but I mean, everyone can read what's on there. Our training is an all-day boot camp style, and we go over a number of things to where everyone involved knows what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and how it's going to happen. This is our line at lunch. And like I said, we move everyone through in about 20 minutes. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm just a little girl from Kansas that just has a big passion for serving my community and feeding kids. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie. That was great. And I remember why we mentioned training, because you were talking about the customer service. We were talking about the customer service piece, and how you train a bunch of teenagers, which is a feat in and of itself, but really how to make that, how to support them in being really great stewards of the program and inclusive to, for the younger children that attend. So with that, we're off to our Q&A session. I know I have a lot of questions, but I don't want to steal the room. So please put your questions in the Q&A box for our fabulous speakers, Debbie and Cara. We have about 7 minutes, so do that. And while you think of those questions for our speakers, I will kick us off with one. Debbie, I know you talk to a lot of the families at your program. You check Facebook, which I think is a super smart way to get feedback on your program. Cara, you do surveys and talk to your partners and site program folks to get feedback. What's the most surprising feedback you've ever gotten from how your collection methods, and what did you do from that?
Well, one thing that I knew I could visually see, and I sort of have my finger on the pulse of the community in a couple of different things, good or bad. But I'm the one that people tell the good things to, and then tell the not so, the way that we do things they don't like. But one of the things that was shared with me, I sort of empowered a couple of acquaintances to kind of talk to me about the impact to their family in the 5-day meal and snack grab and go. And what they brought back to me was that both of them figured an average of a savings to the food budget for their family of about $75 per child per week. And we have, families that have 6+ children. That's huge. That is just huge. to be able to stretch their food dollars and allow them to maybe do something fun with their family, once a month.
Yeah, that's incredible. Kara?
Oh, that is really amazing, Debbie. Thank you. I love to hear that feedback. I imagine some of our families would say the same or something similar. I'm having a hard time thinking of surprising feedback, but I will, I guess I'll just reiterate again that when it comes to surveys, we haven't found the magic formula yet for figuring out how to get the best response rate, whether it's our site coordinators, our parents, or our kids. We love what we can get, and we realize that we're asking somebody to take a few extra minutes out of their day when most of us are probably a little survey weary, to share feedback with us. And in an effort to make it easier, definitely implementing paper-based surveys helped us out. We did start offering some incentives a couple of years ago. We do a gift card drawing to encourage parents to participate. And then being able to close that feedback loop. We want them to know that their answers aren't just going into a void, that we are going to use that information to help us improve the program for them and their kids. And that data is really useful to us. So any and all feedback. It is always kind of fun to read through the responses from the kids in particular, because kids are nothing if not brutally honest about what they like and do not like. Some of the things that they reported wanting to see on the menu did not surprise us. Whether that was pizza, hot dogs, hamburgers, Takis chips, candy, those kind of things. And so, and we always have to kind of chuckle about that, but then go back and say, okay, realistically, we can't give them Takis potato chips, but how can we maybe incorporate some sort of a deconstructed pizza into the menu? Or how can we make a healthier burger or something like that, while still getting them those fruits and vegetables and things that we know need to be part of the meal pattern. So it is, and we always encourage them to include drawings with their surveys. So it's fun to see how they interpret the meal sites.
I love that, asking for a drawing. And you get some artwork out of it too. Awesome. I think this is for Debbie. Do you get the bikes that you give as prizes donated? This person is wondering if you get them donated after you know the size and gender of the winner, or how do you navigate that?
Well, first of all, I have a very, very either understanding or he's so frightened of me rec director. Okay. He very rarely says no. And we are a tax entity supported organization. So it comes out of our general fund. And as far as the size of the bike, we tried to kind of do like the mediocre size or the middle of the row size for about a 10 to 12-year-old. One time it was a small child, and we in our community, we have a Walmart and we have a Kroger, and we buy the majority of our feeding program supplies from those two stores. So when I want to return a 12-inch bike or 16-inch bike for a little trike, they're like, yes, ma'am, we'll be glad to do that. So we just have a pretty good relationship with everyone. So it kind of works out that way. At first, I really contemplated on like a gift certificate, and I just really love the visual of the child coming, getting on the bike, and that's the way it goes. I do have to say, the first person we ever gave a bike to now works for me. Isn't that the greatest?
That's awesome. Well, thank you both so much. Unfortunately, I wish we had more time, but continue to, there's lots of love happening in the chat also. So Cara, Debbie, I encourage you to take a look there. And with that, I'm gonna ask you to stay in touch. Sign up for our newsletter if you don't already. Check out our new and improved website. And then we really do, next slide, want your feedback. So if you just take a moment to answer that survey, more survey talk today. When you exit the screen, it'll appear automatically on your browser window. So thank you for joining us, Cara, Debbie. Thank you for sharing your wonderful, wonderful, deep expertise on this topic. And that's my contact information there if anyone wants to get in contact with me. And we'll see you next month for our final edition of the summer webinar series. So definitely stay tuned for that and have a great day, everyone.